Hi, thank you for joining us for Care Lodge Living Well. Today I have my friend here with us, Ms. Erica Glover, and I'm just going to let her share a little bit of what's been on her heart, her story, what she's been through, and kind of where she's at nowadays. So Erica, you take the floor.
Well, thank you for having me, and I am just so excited to have the opportunity to share. Just a quick story about me. I have been married and I've been divorced twice. I was in an abusive relationship twice. And so the way that I healed through this situation was to put it in writing. So I wrote a book about it. My first marriage, it was approximately 11 years. It was physically abusive. Two children came out of it. In the book, I kind of talk about what I went through as far as raising children, how I felt, the cycles that I went through, the torment, the mind games, all of these things. But at the same time, I talked about how I came out of it, how I healed through it, how I got help, how I was ashamed, but then not ashamed. So, and then my second marriage, was not physically abusive. It was emotionally and mentally abusive. And again, I talked about the cycles. I talked about the warning signs, the red flags that were there, but I ignored them, thinking this or thinking that. But I talked about how I came out of that as well and the lessons I learned. And one of the biggest things that I learned out of it, communication is number one. Not only within a relationship, but if you're in a crisis, you have to know how to relate to other people. You have to communicate. Nobody should suffer alone. We weren't meant to be on this earth alone. So I just wrote this book because I wanted women and men. There are men who do go through abusive situations that you don't have to go through that alone, and to know your value. You don't have to. So that's pretty much it. And I wrote the book. It took me, this book covers approximately, I would say, 17 years of my life. And I narrowed it down to 30, 40 something pages. And I just really wanted people to understand that there is no shame in what you go through, even if it is just awful, terrible. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people suffer in silence, because they feel ashamed or they're embarrassed. And I want to remove that stigma that there is help out there. It's not your fault, and it's not you. So just go and seek help and just live your life. Life doesn't stop just because something bad happens.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is so true. And I know before the call, you and I were talking about how I literally went through this book and just about highlighted the whole entire thing. I mean, look at this. This is about what every section looks like, y'all. And there's so much conviction and truth in what you wrote and how you lived a life in a fishbowl. I mean, you were connected in relationships that were in the spotlight, people that were in ministry and involved in community work, and people who looked at these people as iconic in their life, their own spiritual growth, looked to them for advice, probably went to them for relationship issues or counseling.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So I cannot imagine, I can, how many personal and professional barriers you had to face and overcome. And I mean, you didn't even, in the book, you didn't really go deep into it, but I know you went through it. The struggle with the church family and church body probably saying mean things to you or didn't support you, but you did highlight that there were some really good, strong pillars in your life from your church body who did stand alongside you and supported you, like helping you with childcare or blessed you and your children with, I'm just going to say different blessings, just coming along the way. So there were glimmers of hope along the way for you. And like I've mentioned before on our website and other platforms, those little bright spots fuel you to the next moment, and it gives you the encouragement that you need to keep going. And not everybody has the same story or background or supportive sources that you did, but I love how you unpacked all of that and how Similar, those two stories of survival were, and how the family members never did tell you, you may want to be careful here because there's some issues that have gone on. And I think that's natural because as a mother of two boys, I have trouble trying to imagine that conversation that I would have if my sons were displaying behavior that was unhealthy and saying, hey, future wifey, you might want to rethink this one, you know,
Yeah.
and or just kind of, hey, look out, they're taking medicine for this, and just pay close attention because sometimes they get imbalanced. And that's a kind of way to share, but it's that social stigma of my kid's not crazy, maybe, or things like that. And what a great segue. July is Minority Mental Health Month. And so many of my professional colleagues have said, we need to talk about this because there's already stigma there for mental health and getting help, but it's a little bit different for different cultures.
Exactly, that's true.
Do you have any insight on that?
Well, as far as mental health, and because of what I do as a profession, I'm a nurse practitioner, so I work in the healthcare field. One of my colleagues explained it to me very well, and it opened my eyes that mental health is like, or being mentally ill is the equivalent. They treat it the same way as diabetes or high blood pressure. There's no stigma behind it. There's medicine, the treatment. There's counseling to take care of it. There's education that you get. So they treat it the same way. So we have to remove the stigma of people getting help because of mental illness. Or maybe people fear, oh, you're crazy. Oh, you're bipolar, or you're narcissistic. That's a health issue. The same way you go to a doctor for high blood pressure, you go to the doctor for mental illness. So I think it's important that we encourage people to go get counseling. There's nothing wrong with counseling. There are people who go to school to get degrees and they pay money to be counselors and to be therapists. So there's nothing wrong with, if you go to the doctor for your high blood pressure, you can go to the doctor for depression or mental illness. So there's no stigma about that at all. And I think so much, and especially for myself, and I can't speak for every Black person in America, but in the African American community, there's such a stigma behind it because closed doors. We don't tell what goes on in our house. You don't go out and tell people, oh, this is what you're going on, or you're crying all day, or you're struggling with this. That's just a stigma because you're supposed to be strong and tall and broad and don't show weakness. That's a lie. That's not the truth. That's not real life. Because we're humans and because we fall short and because we don't do everything right, you're going to have issues. You're going to get in those areas of depression or sadness, or even making bad choices, like myself, making decisions that were not the wisest things to do. And one of the biggest things to solving a problem is to acknowledge that you did it, own it. You did, I did this, I made these choices, I made these mistakes, I decided this, even though I did see the red flags, I walked in it anyway. But the only way to get through it is to accept it and to own it and say, yes, I did this. How can I not make this same mistake again? And that's I think that's one of the biggest things in our community about just the stigma. It's bad. You're weak if you do admit that you need help. And we've got to erase that, because just think about it. You could be so much healthier and so much happier if you just go get the help or just talk to somebody. Having a therapist is great. You've got somebody to talk to and just let it all out. And a third person who is objectional, who can give you an objective point of view. That will help you through your situation. You call your friend, you call your family. Call somebody who's especially trained in that area who can lead you in the right direction. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Men, women, or children is necessary. We all need some type of therapy at one point in our lives or another.
Definitely. And I've been there myself. Anxiety, like some for real anxiety, is something that I struggle with, to the point sometimes of even just messing with my skin, just pinching myself to distract from the feeling on the inside. And I mean, it's a real thing. And that's something that you have to consciously be aware of that you are doing or falling victim to, like your own thoughts and mind and processing.